Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole and Jemmy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Recently on Mother Knows Death, we talked about a local news story involving 3 cars pulled out of the river, one of which that had human remains belonging to a woman who was missing for 14 years. It's always shocking when a missing person is found years later, but this case was even more shocking because the body was not found by police, but it was found by a nonprofit missing persons advocacy organization called United Search Corps. On today's external exam, we will be talking to Doug Bishop, who is an underwater search and rescue expert, as well as founder of United Search Corps. Hi, Doug. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. I just learned about your organization, and I can't wait to share it with all of our listeners because it's so great. But before we start talking about this recent case, I want to know a little bit about your background. Like, how did you get interested in underwater search and recovery?
Right? Pretty much by accident. I've spent my entire life in the towing industry. And several years ago, I got into recovering vehicles underwater, utilizing different technology to discover vehicles in order to recover them for environmental purposes. And it just completely transformed into helping families full time to find their missing loved ones, particularly in missing persons cold cases where people are missing and also missing with vehicles.
So that is why you started this organization. What made you feel like there was a need for this particular organization? Were you having people come to you, or what made you decide to start this organization?
Well, after being a part of solving dozens of cold cases in similar fashion, we, came to the conclusion that, there's obviously a big need for this type of specialized searching within missing persons cases. When you bring up the element of cold cases, then you're now factoring in different agencies, a lack of resources in order to work cold cases. Some states and local municipalities, they don't even have the budgets for it. So we're encroaching on what uncovered a gray area within law enforcement, especially when it comes to the utilization of sonar within searches. And we deemed it necessary to form a nonprofit so that we can hopefully one day get the support that we need to do this on a large scale, but also give back and correct the gray area, which I just referred to within law enforcement, and start training and consulting with agencies like we've been doing in order to put those who are in place to do it full time, pretty much equip them with the knowledge and wherewithal to do it themselves.
Does your organization just specialize in underwater rescue, or is it for any person that's missing someone or has a cold case that has not been solved?
Each case is unique. No case is the same. And no area is the same. We rely solely on donations. So we're at the mercy of donations to do any type of search. So number one, it's our funding. Do we have the funding to do a search? And or are we the right resource for that? We work with other organizations when we're not the right resource. We do searches that are on land as well. And also a big part of what we do is advocate for families. Most of the families that we come into contact with have never had any help at all. And they don't necessarily know or were aware that anything like this even exists. So, advocating for a missing person and their family is the number one biggest thing that we do, not to mention searching as well as, bringing answers to family like we've been able to do, several times over the last couple of weeks here in Jersey.
So how does a family, this is my question, because I've never heard of anything like this. And I love that we get to share this, and this case hopefully will really blow this open for you because it's such a great thing that you're doing. It's just, how does somebody even find out about you that just has a case like this? They do maybe a Google search or something and come across your website.
Yeah.
How do they go about contacting you?
Info at unitedsearchcorps.org. That's our email for case processing, and also our website, unitedsearchcorps.org. And, a lot of our cases come through agencies, from detectives themselves and family members, or simply community members that reach out that are familiar with the work that I do, such as stories that are written, podcasts like yourself. The podcasters you're doing right now will fall on the ears of some missing person's family or a community member somewhere that will take the time to look into cases in their area and send us an email saying, hey guys, we found this case in our area and so forth. Regardless of how we get a case, we vet them and then we enter them into our system. That way, when we're in particular areas, we can reach out to family or local law enforcement to be utilized as a tool for that particular case.
So when you get cases submitted to you, what's the process like? Do you have a board that you all sit down and talk? Is this something that we could handle? And if so, I guess you did say earlier that there were times that you think it's not within the realm of what you do, and then you would send it elsewhere.
Yeah. So number one, we process every email our volunteers do when they come in. Then they're passed on to another layer of vetting. And then, either myself or one of our other specialists will look into it, which we're all volunteers, basically. None of us get paid to do this. And when we're able to vet them to make sure that somebody is missing, then, it just breaks that barrier of, okay, this is a legit case. Because for those of you who are listening and watching this, over 500,000 people go missing every year, and the majority of them are found. So a lot of the missing persons cases that do get turned into us end up being cases, just from older information that haven't been updated, articles and posts, podcasts, videos, you name it. So it's really important that we vet them. And, our process mainly is, is this a legit case for one? Is there components here that force us to reach out to law enforcement? Are there components, is there family involved? Is there no family involved? All of those different things we break down within that case once we know it's a legit case. And then our board decides whether or not we have the resources to take on that case or we're the appropriate resource. And it just pretty much gets disseminated like that, according to, a bunch of different moving factors. Every missing persons case is different. Every area is different. The circumstances within those cases, the individual that's missing, there's no case that's the same. So it's pretty complex.
And for this particular case that we're talking about, so this family called you. How can you give us a timeline as to when they contacted you about their family member that had been missing for so long?
Yeah, so we initially did not get notified by family on this particular case. The Black and Missing Foundation did a post on their platform mentioning the case details, which Black and Missing Foundation is a great advocacy group for spreading awareness for people that are missing. They mentioned that there was a vehicle involved in this disappearance, and quite a few people sent us emails in regards to this. And us being in the region over the last, month and a half, we had the opportunity in between other operations in New York to come and perform searches on this particular case. And thankfully, we were successful. Here in the Philly-Camden region, we have 17 different cases where people are missing and missing with vehicles. So there's a lot of searching that's going to be taking place, over the next several weeks.
What made you guys look in that particular area for the car?
Pretty much every case that we do, before we do it, we develop a profile on the person that we're looking for, which is, what information do we have with the who, what, when, where, why, the who were they, where were they employed, their home address, what were their hobbies, where did their lovers live, their family members live, as much information as we can gather to determine where we search. In this particular case, the biggest thing was, according to law enforcement, her last known whereabouts were at her home that evening. Her son actually spent the evening with her, left around 11 p.m. And several hours later, she, just vanished. Her children visited her house once they realized she was gone, noticed that she had not returned. So we knew it was pretty accurate that her last known location was her home address, verified location. At that point, without any other, mitigating factors or something taking us into a different area, it's then, okay, we need to identify the closest body of waters that are deep enough to conceal a vehicle, which in her scenario, she was just several blocks away from the Cooper River itself. Where we ended up locating her vehicle was just approximately a mile down the Cooper River, near a park area, where there's basically no obstructions for a vehicle to enter the water. So the Cooper River was our main focus to start with. Typically, we could then go from there. What's the next closest body of water? Which, in this scenario, it would have been the Delaware River or one of the other smaller reservoir ponds and so forth in the region.
Yeah, and I guess that would make sense that she would be driving around her neighborhood. I'm very familiar with the area because I told you earlier, my husband's a firefighter there, and I've lived around
Mhm.
here my entire life. I just want to describe to everyone what this particular area where you found the car is, that every single time we drive by it, because the Cooper River is a big river, but this particular area where the car was found is behind this semi-seedy strip mall area and behind the pub, which is like this awesome restaurant that we love. But every time you go back there, you're just like, something good's not happening back here. It's just like a little shady back here.
Yeah, it's
And
really dark. It's a real
that's
dark area.
yeah, it's just dark, and it just looks it's not it's funny because the Cooper River is very beautiful. On the other side of Route 130, there's people rowing and sitting there eating like picnic. And then on the other side of the road, it's nobody's just sitting back there to look at the pretty water. It just looks a little
No.
shady, I guess I would say, back there. So
Yeah.
so the car then was not sticking up out of the water. How did you first determine that there were cars under the water at that particular area?
Yeah, so we arrived later in the day, and we put our equipment into the river. I would say adjacent to the Wawa, downstream from where we ended up locating, right there near Park. We immediately
Mhm.
detected a vehicle right there off the park's edge. We set up our dive equipment, we dove on it, identified that vehicle, and then continued the search up the river into the Cooper River because we previously searched other parts of the Cooper River in the past. So this particular stretch was of importance to clear this time. And when we got up there to where we located her vehicle, we located an additional 5 vehicles in that entire
Oh
little
my
stretch
god.
there. So a total of 6. The vehicles that were able to be removed, we did remove all 3 of them. One of them, in which the one that did contain Bernardine's remains.
Wow, that's just so amazing. It's just crazy to think that so many people just drive their car into the river and it's there and nobody knows.
Yeah, that particular area, which is great for you guys being local, and I'm sure you have a lot of local following. Advocating for a safety barrier there is real deal. There's no obstruction, let alone even a curb at that location to prevent a vehicle from going in. We did move the picnic table right in front of that little area right there, but a picnic table is not going to stop, someone having a medical accident or somebody that is intoxicated or simply recklessly driving and loses control and enters right into the river. One vehicle is one thing, 2 vehicles, 3 vehicles, 6 vehicles in that area. Obviously, there's over, whatever you want to label it, that there's a risk factor there that has been identified big time where vehicles are going in there. Let alone we're addressing somebody that has lost their life in doing so. So it's an issue there that needs to be corrected so this doesn't happen in the future.
Do you have any idea what the other cars were doing in there? Did they have license plates on them? Or
Yeah,
I mean, that's just
um,
something you don't really deal with?
Yeah, so we identify all the vehicles as much as we can during our searching. That way, when we give that data to the local or state or federal agencies in the area, they can decipher whether or not they're connected to other major crimes and so forth. Most of the overwhelming majority of vehicles that we find underwater are connected to, violent crimes and insurance fraud and so forth. No cars underwater for a good reason. So it's always alarming to find a car, even though we've found so many of them across the country, and it's good to get them out. It's not only is there evidence possibly in those vehicles, but those are the tons of toxins within those, the glues, the oils, the synthetics. They don't need to be in our waterways if we can get them out. So it's good that we were able to get the three that were recoverable out of the river there.
What's the feeling like when you pull the car out and it's the one that you were looking for?
It's very powerful stuff. When we're in those moments, you're realizing that you're able to give a family and a community answers to a nightmare. No human being is meant to go through a tragedy and losing somebody and not knowing what happened. That's the worst. We're not wired. Nobody is wired for that. And when you don't have those answers, you're forced to put up walls and create walls of what ifs, and those things just sit there, and they sit there, and what is built within those walls because you put them up is torture. It's torture being in between those walls. So having answers to something, and that now allows you to process and grieve and move on, no matter how horrific the loss is. If you have the answers, you can process it. Without those answers, you can't process it, and that's just a real life nightmare that we're just not meant to go through. So knowing that I can relieve those families of, that type of grief and relieve them there really aren't words within the human language that can describe that, really. It's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is just so great. I always say that on the podcast. We talk about these stories all the time of people that you have a loved one that goes missing, and there always has to be some amount of hope that maybe she drove away and she just had a mental breakdown and started another life and she'll want to come back or something. When you
Hmm.
don't have a concrete body, and think about this when like kids get kidnapped or anything, it's just so terrible to have. It must be the worst thing that a human has to go through, really. So that's so cool that
Yeah.
you're able to help people with that.
Hmm.
When you found her car, obviously you were going to open it and see what was inside. And I know that there were human remains inside. I'm assuming after 14 years, it was just skeletonized remains. What was that something you were able to identify yourself, eh, or is
Yeah.
that? I mean, I know that you guys called the police at some point and say, "Hey, we found this," but you
Hmm.
you were able to identify that
Yeah.
yourself. And
We
yeah,
identified
go
the
ahead.
vehicle. We identified, the vehicle and the remains prior to notifying law enforcement. That way, where we're not unjustly, creating, a lot of resources to be wasted. So whenever we do make those notifications to law enforcement, we're pretty thorough with what we turn over to them. And yeah, this vehicle, it was identified to be her. Uh, After the fact, during the recovery, which Camden County Prosecutor's Office was absolutely thorough with their exhaustion of resources, and the resources capability was just really top notch. I do this around the country. So when I say that, I can say that, that means a lot when I say that. Don't take it lightly, because there's a lot of this country that our law enforcement does not have the capability or the resources due to budgets and all of that type of stuff, or simply they're just inadequate. Whereas though, since I've been here in Jersey, it has honestly been one of the most impressive experiences on the recoveries that I've done recently related to cold cases.
Well, that's good to know because I live here.
Yeah, very, very, very thorough. The medical examiner's office, the prosecutor's office, at Camden PD. The Belmar dive team was lights out. They were able to get the job done. And it's not easy to do this type of stuff in water you can't see. Because it's lights out. There's no eyes. You got to use your 10 eyes in order to see underwater. And when you factor in currents and also, doing something as serious as an underwater forensics recovery, there's very little room for error. And those guys were just lights out with it,
So when you
literally.
call police in these cases, is there ever any like weirdness, a stepping on toes thing, you're working in my jurisdiction thing, or how is your work received?
Never. I never have a problem. Communication is key. Respect is key. If I have 20 law enforcement representatives out there, yeah, a good majority of them are familiar with the work that I do, and also it's how you carry yourself. It's how you represent yourself, and I just don't have that problem. Thankfully, knock on wood. Um, there's never a lot of egos involved. Obviously, after the fact, when you involve media and so forth, you get a lot of the component of how come this guy did it, and you know, the resources that we have, taxpayers' dollars going towards didn't do it. You always get a lot of that. But what I do is specialized. There is no training in law enforcement for what it is that I do. Like that falls back on that gray area that we identified, which is why we formed the nonprofit. Um, and the technology that I'm utilizing today didn't exist when most of these people that we recover went missing. So there's a lot of different factors into, hey, why did this guy do it and they didn't do it? Outside of that, those are pretty much never have a problem. It's always a pleasure to work with law enforcement across the country, and it's surprising. A lot of times it's kind of like surreal that I'm even capable of doing these types of things, but it keeps happening and happening and happening. And even though we're sitting here discussing one of the cases that we've recently solved, still just doesn't seem real. It's some pretty extreme stuff. It's the kind of thing that like miracles are made of, and it's just really surreal.
I was thinking that like this family, because I want to know like what happened when you called them and what their reaction was. They must think that that it's a miracle that you were able to do this for them.
Yeah, the family was absolutely amazing. Just some of the most genuine, caring, down to earth people that you could ever meet. And her children have lived the last 14 years not knowing where their mother is, their grandmother is, and that's tough, you know. Um, any family that loses their loved one, like you mentioned earlier, kind of you have to draw in the blanks. You have to, what if, what happened, where are they, and then you have all the nasty scammers in these cases, and I deal with it in almost every cold case that I work with, where people attack these families in their most vulnerable moments, knowing how desperate they are, and so they go down these rabbit holes of these leads and these people that are talking to them year after year after year, and it's torture. It's absolute torture. But you have to follow up on it as a family member because you just want to find your loved one. You'll do anything to find your loved one, whether it's travel 3 states away like they did, and uh, all this other stuff that I really don't want to get into. But it's tragic what they have to go through, year after year after year. And then when you involve any other component as far as anything going on in their life at the time that may be off just a little bit, then they become these extravagant conspiracies of what ifs, and this happened or that person did it because this doesn't add up. Now because that doesn't add up, it's oh, they did it. Something's off here. And those are the natural torture things that go on within families of lost ones that don't have answers because they don't know. And simply giving them the answers, you could see it just melt off of them. Everything that they've been carrying just instantly disappears. Instantly. And that's just something that, you can't even put that stuff into words, what that's like, watching it just melt away and all the worry go away. And the shock of, grief finally being able to set in. processing, now they know. A lot of the situations that I get into, some of them aren't great, some of them are horrific, but even in those moments, like they're still able to process it, you know. And the family was very, very grateful when I met with them, and I don't know where, like, I'm just at loss for words to try even to describe what it is, even though I've done this a lot. It's tough. It's tough stuff to try to describe because it's not natural to be able to, just, you're like healing somebody, they're being healed by knowing now, all of the things like that they described to me moving forward, now they can do without knowing. You no longer have to look over your shoulder wondering, oh, is that them? Or am I going to see them? Or I wonder if they're coming back, or wonder if this horrific thing happened, or, there's so many different variables to it.
Yeah, especially when an adult is missing with a car, I guess there always is the possibility that they just kind of ran away and started a new life or something. And
Mhm.
I can't even imagine what that's like. And then growing up as a child with your mother missing like that and feeling, did they not love me? Did they leave me? You just don't have any. And she had a history of depression or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, she had
Is
some issues with depression. Those things tended to get inflated a little bit. Like I was telling you about, the little things become really big things.
Yeah.
And in an investigative standpoint and so forth, yeah, it's natural for that to happen. There were some factors that led people to believe, that she left, she might have harmed herself and so forth. Um, a lot of times when we find the where, it makes the why a lot more clear. In this scenario, I firmly believe that this is simply an accident along the corner of that road late at night. It's very dark,
Totally could be.
zero obstructions to get in. And there's obviously other vehicles in there too that went in at that same spot or nearby. Um, it's just so easy to say, oh, she did this or she did that. It's not a natural thing to do. That's not a natural way for a woman to go. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I believe it was just an accident, just a really tragic accident.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room. Only once in a while, I put The Gross Room on sale, and this time has come. It is a Memorial Day sale, and it is going to be only $20 for a year of gross. And in The Gross Room, I started it back in 2019. There are thousands of posts, videos, photos, articles written by some guests. There's just so much information on there, lots of audio too as well. And Maria and I actually have been doing Mother Knows Death. We did about 50 episodes before we even came on the air to you guys. So if you're interested in listening to any of that, it's just so much stuff. It'll keep you busy for hours and hours and hours a day. And we put out new stuff every day. So you can go to thegrossroom.com, and the sale starts when does the sale start?
On Sunday.
On Sunday, yes. And we will see you there. What time of year did she go missing? I'm just curious if it was like icy conditions or anything.
No, there were no icy conditions. It was really good weather. But it was at night when she went missing. Theoretically, there were neighbors that said that she left late at night, and it fit the son's timeline. The son had visited with her the night before prior, and she was fine. She was very loving. She had had a couple of drinks that evening. I believe there was a beer still sitting on the porch. So why she went out, we don't know. We don't know why she went out. But I think it's just simply an accident.
Yeah, I mean, you can, on that road back there, it is pitch dark back there, and
Yeah.
it's the back of a shopping center, which isn't the greatest shopping center, so it's
Mhm.
probably not well lit. And you could drive really fast on that road if you wanted to.
Oh yeah. And while we were sitting there, we were, wondering, like, man, we're going to see an accident right here. It's a big sweeping bend. Cars are racing back and forth. And, there's a lot of energy back there, like you were getting at. And people, up to no good, people that are in and through there, they're cutting through from Main Street to Main Street. So they're rushing to get through there. And then at night, it's so dark. Even when they're with me and, the FBI and other people out there, like it was pitch black out there. And if it weren't for the lights on our dive unit, it's really, really creepy back there at night for sure.
I know you've done some other interviews before this even happened, just because you are an underwater recovery expert. And I know that you were recently on the news talking about the men who died in the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore when it collapsed. Can
Yes.
you explain what may have happened to the victims in that case?
On the bridge?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
they were working on the bridge, right? And some of them were possibly inside of their truck eating lunch or something.
Yeah. In the initial reports that we got and so forth, corroborated that, like, they were having lunch. There were several of them that were in a vehicle or two, and they were trapped, absolutely trapped. Whether or not it's a bridge tragedy, an accident, like we're discussing that Bernadine was in, or a simple roadside accident. It's key to have something that will prevent you from being trapped within your vehicle. I can only imagine what that's like. I know I've found a lot of people that were trapped in their vehicle, and I can guarantee you each and every one of them wish they had something that could get out of the vehicle. So I'm very passionate about the tool that we sell on our website, unitedsearchcorps.org, the window breaker. It's made in America. It's the most cost-effective $10 you can spend in your entire life, pretty much. It will save your life. It can help save somebody else's life. It'll cut your seatbelt. It'll bust open your window. And it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless to have one of those on your keychain. And if you don't have it, it's going to take a miracle to get out of your vehicle. It's not easy. There's a lot of myths of using your headrest to get out. That your headrest is not going to break your window. Your visor, or some people have these, fancy devices that they keep in their glove box. Anything in your glove box is not going to be accessible in an emergency. The odds of you being able to reach your glove box when you're pinned to your seat or so forth, or your car has flipped, or your car has gone underwater, and there's pressure issues and all of that. You're just, those seconds of having that in your glove box is not going to help you. You need something that's accessible near your steering wheel, and it's going to stay there within arm's reach, or it's not going to be of use in order to save your life. Those moments are, I'm sure, really, really horrific moments for anybody who has, gone through anything like that. I've been in the towing industry my whole life, so I'm very familiar with really bad accidents, and whether that's in water or on land. Simple car accidents kill people every single day, simply from smoke inhalation. A small accident that you would look at and think, wow, somebody died in that accident. Well, yeah, their doors were pinned a little bit and they couldn't get out. Meanwhile, smoke got into the cab, and they couldn't release the smoke because the windows don't go down. So you need something to break the window. There's so many different factors of why it's important to have that particular tool. Like I was on Fox discussing, it's important. It'll save your life, or it'll save somebody else's life. Whether it's a hot day, like you were talking about it today, it was a hot day at the zoo. If you were to come in the
That
parking lot,
fried my brain completely.
and if you were in a parking lot and there's a child or an animal trapped in a car, and you can seriously see that something like this, they need to be rescued. If you have that on your keychain, you can easily pop somebody's window. And I'm not advocating for this, but absolutely do it. You can save a pet, a child. It happens all the time. Every single day, somebody loses their life because they do not have one of those devices. And it's $10. $10 is, where can you even buy anything anymore for $10? Let alone
I
something
know,
that's
right?
going
You
to
can't
save your
even get a
life.
coffee.
Yeah, it's tough. Um, and any of those that we sell, all 100% of the proceeds go to helping families, advocating for them, searching. Every little bit of it goes to what it is that we do at United Search Corps.
Do you think the guys on the Francis Scott Key Bridge, if they had a similar type of tool, and because this is how I look at it, and this is why I'm glad that I heard that interview with you, because I don't I don't really think about that. I drive in the car all the time with my kids and stuff, but I'm a like a regular person. I don't really think about that I'm ever going to fall into the water, because I say like, "Oh,
Yep.
I don't live down the shore." Even though I do cross water all the time. I'm on the bridge,
Hmm.
whatever. Um so I never really thought about what I would do if I was in the car with the kids. So what is
Yep.
this acronym that you have that helps people with that?
So it's SWOC, or it used to be SWCO. But the gist of it is, when you have that tool, it's you cut your seatbelt if you cannot get your seatbelt off. A lot of times your seatbelt will jam. You cannot get it off. Your seatbelt will kill you in a lot of these car accidents. So having something that can slice through it, seatbelt's number one. Window. You go for your window. Whether your electronics still work, put it down. If they don't work, which is really common, or it's the pressure won't allow it to go down, you can use it to bust the window open. After your window is open, your seatbelt, window, out. Children are first. That's the acronym as we stand right now. And this is developed by Gordon Briesbeck out of Canada, who is a professional when it comes to being trapped in a vehicle underwater. He has done the most extensive research when it comes to that. And that's what it is that we follow at United Search Corps, which is seatbelt first, then your window, out. Children are first. Always children first, because once you get out, you're not getting back in that vehicle. So if you were to get out and your children are in there, your children are trapped. You have seconds to react in some of these cases. Your car does not float long. Depending on the current, every car is different. Every body of water is different. Temperature. There's so many different factors what a vehicle does when it enters water, that it's just seconds count. So seatbelt, window, out, children are first. That's the acronym everybody needs to remember when they're trapped in an accident of any kind, which is seatbelt, window, children first.
Yeah, that's so good to know, because it's just I think that a lot of people every day that are just living their life and distracted by everything just aren't thinking about that kind of stuff, and then,
No,
a
no,
rescue expert like yourself will always you would be fine in that situation, but like a regular
I can't.
person.
I can't even say that, because seconds count. Seconds count. So if I'm not able to, I will. I can fall victim too. Anybody can. But being aware of this and taking the appropriate measures to mitigate risk, such as having a little $10 tool, is key. Because like you said, you don't think you live near water, but you cross over it. I've had cars clear those little concrete barrier walls on the outside of bridges, and nobody ever even know it. Guardrails, accidents happen, cars go off road. The other person involved in the accident never stops because they're intoxicated or they're wanted or whatever factors, reason they don't stay. Meanwhile, and nobody saw anything, and there's no sign of any damage to a bridge or a guardrail. So it can happen. It can happen absolutely to anybody. And the biggest thing is it's not just water. It's not just water. The odds of you going into water and losing your life are so small. You have way more odds of losing your life in just a simple car accident on the roadway without even going into water. So it's knowing about simply that tool. And I'm not here to just sell a tool. It's not about that, but it really is critical. It really is critical. When you've recovered as many bodies as I have out of vehicles, and you've done so in predicaments, you can tell that person was trying to escape. They were trapped in literally a glass coffin, sort of. I mean, it's important. It's important when you've cleaned up as many accidents as I have from that are fatal, that people should have lived in simply because they were trapped and died of smoke inhalation or fire. And it's important. It's really, really important. One of the most dangerous things anybody listening to this or watching this will ever do is get behind the wheel of a car. It's extremely deadly. We're so comfortable in our cars. We love them. No matter how fancy or much of a beater it is, we're so comfortable. It's our car. We're listening to music. We all have our own little vibe in our car, and it's our own little bubble. That bubble gets popped really, really quickly, and it always happens when you least expect it. Death doesn't give notices until after the fact. So there's no warning. So what are you supposed to do? You got to just be aware, and then also, take the necessary steps to equip yourself to be prepared for an emergency. It's really the biggest thing that you can do.
Yeah, it's smart because you just got me when you were saying, "Oh, what are you gonna grab something in your glove compartment?" And I think like I have napkins in there, some extra straws, and like
Yeah,
phone chargers.
yeah,
There's just nothing that would be able to even cut a seatbelt for sure.
yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of other devices out there that claim that they can, save your life and this and that. And, the one we sell is made right here in America, and it's rigorously tested with really, really high end, certifications. It's any other tool is going to be made, not in America. They're not certified like that, and it's really important that you have the appropriate tool. And a lot of those other ones that don't even really work and then work sometimes, they cost so much, and they're not going to save your life. Anything in your glove box is not going to save your life. You might as well put it in the trunk, really. I have,
No, it's true because
yeah,
you don't think about your car getting smushed up in the
yeah,
process too.
yeah,
Like it's not
right.
like you normally sit in your car
Yeah, I put myself in
upside
a
down
vehicle.
and
Yeah,
everything else.
I put myself in a vehicle and flipped it upside down with a forklift, and it was shocking how I was pinned to my seat by my seatbelt. It was shocking to me. Even though I knew I was being flipped over, when I was upside down on my seatbelt, the way I was pinned to my seat was, yeah, like I said, if it's not around your steering wheel and within arm's reach, and I'm not talking about leaning arm's reach, because you are pinned to your seat. If it's not within arm's reach, say your visor or your, dash steering wheel area, you're not going to be able to access it in a lot of accidents. You're just not going to be able to. It's really
Well, I
important.
know what I'm buying when this interview's done. I'm gonna be like, you need to send me one of those right away. So, all right. So we obviously know about this case that we just talked about this week. This isn't the first one that you've helped out with. So you've done this before and gave closure to families before in different situations, correct?
Yeah, dozens of times. Um, I mean, locally, we can talk about the other one that the prosecutor's office just sort of unsealed yesterday, which was the case that I solved a couple weeks ago in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, right outside of Jersey City, West New York. Charles Stanton Murphy vanished 42 years ago.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I found his vehicle just a couple of blocks from where he was last seen. 42 years. Yep. Yeah.
That's so mind blowing that you're looking for your family member all this time and they've been. Especially this one in Camden, like, these people have probably driven by that area of the river for years, hundreds of times, just to think she's right there.
Wow. Like your word for word, what was said to me with family and friends is just beyond disbelief. And it's typical once we make a discovery because you start like, wow, like how many times have I been here? I've even fished here and so forth. Like it's pretty mind blowing once you realize, wow, really all of this time, like right here. Yeah, obviously, we're talking about areas not a lot of people want to be in. Most of these waterways we make discoveries in, they're not really swam in. They're really, some of them are murky, um, and it's yeah, you just would never think what's below the surface of a lot of waters in America, but out of sight, out of mind, type of thing. What's below the surface, you just don't know. And if it was pretty water, everything would be found already. So a lot of it has to do with,
Yeah.
just, yeah.
So those other cars, so you said you found a total of 6 cars. So those other ones are still under there and nobody has any idea why they're there, like what's happening with that?
Well, I dove on all of the
They're
vehicles.
not accessible.
I dove on all of the vehicles. I assessed them. We turned that data over to the prosecutor's office. They are handling it. They do have a really good plan in place to take care of that. I can't discuss that information just because it's still being investigated within the prosecutor's office. But they're taking the appropriate measures necessary to make it happen. Though I can tell you that they took it very seriously.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today. It was really great to talk to you. And I'm sure everyone that's listening now is just happy to have this information in case they're currently going through a situation like this, or God forbid they're ever in a situation like this. It's just good to know that there's someone out there advocating for you, because the police are busy too, right? So once they're done working with your case and they're dead with leads, it's kind of like they need to move on to the next case too. So
to
it's just great.
justify.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And just to reiterate on that, they have to justify their use of resources. Every department does, in order to best serve the public interest. And a lot of people don't really understand that particular dynamic. So it's really nice for, our organization when we can come in and help families. And if we have the resources in order to do searches, we don't have to justify it at all. But we can come in and we can do what we do to help families. And if anybody's listening to this, they have a case, they can reach out to us at info@unitedsearchcorps.org.
And do you have, I know that you don't want the families to pay anything. Is there some kind of donation process there as well?
Yes.
People can donate.
we don't charge families. And on our website, unitedsearchcorps.org, we have a donation link. You can go to the donation tab in the menu section, click on donate, and that's exactly how we operate. 100% of everything we do is strictly on donations. And it's the $1, it's the $5, every donation counts, because it's extremely daunting, the expenses of the logistics behind these type of searches. It's pretty daunting. When we don't have government funding, not yet at least. So the donations are absolutely critical for us helping families. It doesn't happen without it. So please consider it.
That's so great. Awesome. Thanks so much again.
Yeah. Thank you for having.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.